Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Tonight, my guest is Elijah Walsh. He's an outspoken, lively, bearded transgender man. Elijah is a social media influencer, advocate, and educator for the LGBTQ plus community. Since beginning his transition over a decade ago, he has been committed to spreading awareness and positivity with a dash of humor and a great deal of research. He enjoys teaching almost as much as he enjoys learning. Elijah acknowledges that gender and sexuality are a spectrum and the identities are ever evolving. If you'd like to read more of his bio, I'm going to cut it there. Visit his website. Welcome to the show, Elijah Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My favorite question to start with, how did you choose your name?
Oh, so this was a name that I had always felt a deep connection with, but I didn't know why. So I just assumed that I was going to name my child it. And I decided that around the age of 13. And when I got a little bit older, a friend and I were talking, this was 5 years before I started transitioning. A friend and I were talking about baby names. And I said, Elijah, I might spell it a little bit differently, regardless of sex and sign of birth. That's what I'm going to name my child. And she looked at me and said, you know what? You kind of look like an Elijah. Done. That day forward, we were actually outside of a party. We went back in the party, and I announced to everybody that my name is now Elijah. You shall address me as such. And my amazing friends, being that they said, okay. And all night they called me Elijah, and that was it.
Huh. Now, how was this period in relation on the timeline to when you came out as trans?
This was 5 years before. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't realize that I was trans. So I had been going as Eli, for short, or Elijah, for 5 years. So that I had the benefit of that because when I did come out, people didn't have to, get in the habit of using a new pronoun and a new name because they already had the name down 5 years before.
How old were you when you first realized that, when you first identified that, yes, transgender is what I am?
I was 21. I met someone at a bar who was talking about being trans. I didn't know it was a thing. And yeah, 21, 32 now, so it's 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Looking back before that in your youth, what were the signs for you that led you to this, or that once you realized that you were trans and you could kind of trace those breadcrumbs back?
I think there were a lot, but because it was always pushed under the rug, I can't I can't really put my thumb on all of them. But just looking back at pictures, even now to this day, I'm looking, I'm like, how did nobody know? I do have a video recording of. Do you remember the Flintstones?
Oh, yeah.
They were Bam Bam and Pebbles, and I swore that I was Bam Bam. I wanted to be Bam Bam. I refused to put a shirt on, so they have a video recording of me running around with a plastic bag just screaming Bam Bam. I tried to cut my hair in a bowl cut. It was terrible. But my father was in the background, and you could hear my dad saying, any other little girl would think that she's Pebbles, but this one, and I think I was either 4 or 5 at that age, and I asked my parents to change my name multiple times growing up, and they were always unisex names. But they just, oh, you're just a tomboy. I was classified as a lesbian before I even came out, so I think there were a bunch of signs that just didn't know what they were or added up to just yet.
So you mentioned that you met a trans man in a bar, and that was kind of what made it all click for you. Was there an adjustment period or something around that time in coming to terms with the fact that you were trans?
Not really. Maybe the 2 hours there that I was at the bar with him, that was really it. It was such an exciting moment for me that, I thought that every masculine lesbian wanted a beard and loved being misgendered and wanted to be seen as a guy. I thought that was normal because that's how I felt. But when I met him and he was talking about his story and how aligned I felt with it and the things that he was feeling and going through, it was incredible. It was like a weight off my shoulder is really how I felt. That my wife now was there at the bar, and I went running to her, excited to tell her that I think that I'm trans. So really, there, just that 2 hours, I was like, oh, I'm not just a lesbian. Okay, cool. No, I'm a man. That makes sense.
So
It was really good.
you had your egg crack, you had it scrambled and cooked up, and you were done and ready to go in 2 hours.
A month later, I had my first appointment at the doctor. I was that short.
So you had the woman who would become your wife there with you, and you ran straight over to her once you figured this out. I'm assuming you were already in a relationship.
Yep.
And what was that conversation like, and what were the subsequent conversations like? How did you two kind of come to terms with it together, and how did it affect your relationship?
She is an incredible human. I mean, somebody that I knew when coming to her with that information, I was excited. I knew how she was going to react, just with the excitement of support with me, because I knew that she loved me, and she's such an open, supportive person. And this is somebody who is cisgendered and would have considered herself to be heterosexual prior to meeting me. She met
Hmm.
me at a lesbian bar. She was there with some friends. It was very unintentional. Had never been with somebody that was female presenting prior to. So I already knew that, going into it, that she was kind of up for whatever
Okay.
because of that. So I came to her and she just said, okay, can we look into this a little bit? And we were up, I think until like 4 a.m. just doing some research. And she turned to me and said, do you want me to make the phone call for you? Because I have a little bit of social anxiety, as you knew. She said, do you want me to make the phone call for you tomorrow? And she's been incredible.
Going back to your new friend at the bar, were you able to
Uh,
stay in contact with him? I know that you mentioned in our pre-interview you didn't have a particular role model or confidant, so no, you weren't able to keep that going, huh?
I didn't know how much of an impact he was making on my life that night.
Hmm.
No, and he told me about the Mazzoni Center, which is the LGBT clinic that I ended up going to in
Mm.
Philadelphia. Eh, but that was it. I honestly I couldn't even tell you his name, which I feel terrible about. But
Hmm.
I didn't know how much of an impact he really made on me that day.
So now getting to your coming out story, people do it in all kinds of different ways, individual conversations, a Facebook post, an email. How did you go about having those conversations?
When I came out as trans, most of my family received an email. My entire family, we're not very close to begin with. We never were. It was on par for us in our relationship. And I felt like that was the best way to tell them without having to be there for their immediate reaction, to give them time to process
Hmm.
before responding if they wanted to. So the majority of them got that. My mother, father, and sister all received a text message. And I know that sounds a little wild, but that is close for our relationship. A text message, they didn't get the email, so um, they each got that. Now it's funny because my wife and her family, they got me going to the party that was only a few days later, screaming about it at the top of my lungs out of pure excitement because her family is incredible, and I knew that. So, but my mom, dad, and sister, the ones that were closest, they got text,
Hmm.
and that's what I felt comfortable doing.
And how did that go over? Was there any particular reaction to that method, or giving people, most of the people in your family, that email and that time to process before having a direct conversation? Do you feel that that really helped?
I think it did. I think it did. I heard stories months later, years later, about how they really felt when they got it, when they got the email. Most people actually didn't respond at all, um, which was fine. My grandmother, however, sent me a card in the mail. She didn't respond back to the email, but she sent me a card. And it was funny because the card had flowers on it. It looked really nice and pretty, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" But I opened it up, and she basically said that, I was an abomination to the family, and it was not a pretty note and a very pretty card. Um, I think that was the best decision though that I could have made, was through an email with these family members I wasn't really close to begin with. I also think it was a good decision for my mom, my dad, and my sister. My father, now he said to me, "Finally, son," when I said I think I'm trans and I'm going to start on hormone therapy, which sounds great, but he's also the type of man who will say anything to make anybody happy in that moment, and so he's kind of hard to gauge
Okay.
anyway.
How did the relationships work out after that? Were you able to maintain much of a relationship with that grandmother, and how was it maintain with your immediate family?
So in the beginning, I listened to everyone's concerns, worries, opinions, and so forth. I listened. I didn't know a ton. There was not a ton of information or resources at the time. And so I did the best that I could to help educate them about, the way that I was feeling, what I was going to be doing, what that was going to look like. Um, and it was a lot of me trying to teach and them shutting their ears off. And my grandmother in the very beginning was very hesitant. This is the one that sent me the card. However, and this is going to be a nice story, about 2 to 3 years into my transition, she's very traditional in her ways. She believes that when we come over, that all the women in the family stay in the kitchen, the men go out and watch football and do clean up and things like that. When I walked in, immediately she looked at me and she said, "Hey, can you take out the trash?" Which to me in this family was very, that was seen as a man when I walked in and I had a job to do. I had a chore to do. So that was fantastic. And really, most of the family just kept their mouths shut about it because they knew that I was excited about it, and I wouldn't have backed down by anything for anything until Trump got elected, and some other, relationships fell down because of that. But
Do you feel like that was more because they were now emboldened, like a lot of the country was, to stand up and say, no, I'm against this, or it was just purely the political leanings and people saying that they were for this person that for all intents and purposes was strongly against um, everything that we stand for?
of the very few conversations that I've had with some of them, they all tend to surround the bathroom bills that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And questions of whether or not trans people should use the bathroom of their gender. And so and they would go back to that and say that they will continue to vote for people who will not allow me equal rights. And so that's kind of what dug it in there for me. I haven't spoken to my mother or my grandmother in now about 3, maybe 4 years, because I was older and I was completely independent. And I felt like I was very secure in my decision to start therapy and my realization of who I was. Their opinions really didn't phase me. I think too because we weren't very close. That my uncle said to me, "I'll never see you as a man," and I said to him, "Then don't see me at all." And it was very simple for me because I was always going to do what was going to make me happy. It wasn't affecting them, but it was going to affect my life entirely. And so I made that clear.
What other realms were you in that you had to come out to? Were you in school, or I know you had a job?
I
And
was in school and working.
okay, and how did those different areas go? And what were some of those conversations like?
Oh, I've got stories of both, but at school, I made it very clear because although I had socially changed my name 5 years before transition, I didn't legally do it until a few years into it. And so when I was starting my hormone therapy, I would go into school in the first day and go to my professors and say, "Hey, I know what name is on there," and I've always been very loud about my transition. Not everyone is, and that's fantastic. But I would easily say to them, "I'm trans, and I know that's my legal name, but can you call me something else?" And so school, I didn't have a bad experience with that either. I think being very upfront with a big smile on my face about it, really setting the tone of coming out to all these people and letting them know, who they've got in their class, helped a lot. At work, it was the same thing. I learned with coming out for the fourth time on this one, that I really set the tone. And so when I came out to everybody, I came out with complete excitement. And that's what I received the majority of the time back.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned it, and you had alluded to it in our pre-interview. What were the 4 times coming out?
First time was bisexual, and then lesbian because I didn't understand the split attraction model, and then trans, and then bi again.
So it was a nice cycle. You went all the way around.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. No, I just took up the entire rainbow. It was great.
So you're just going through the LGBT flag and just going, okay, that one and that one and that one and that one,
Checking them off.
checking up
I
all the
got a couple more
boxes.
to go.
You're just trying to fill up the punch card to get the free one, right? Did you have someone that supported you, or was it on your side in a way that you weren't expecting?
Not really.
Mm,
Honestly, I think that there was the surprise that I felt were it came from people that I didn't know that were of older generations. I still, because I know it doesn't sound like very long ago, but 11 years ago, there wasn't as much awareness or visibility of trans people. And what, the majority of people knew that they've seen it on television and movies were not the best depiction of trans people. So it always kind of surprised me when uh, older people that didn't know me were supportive. And that was just, coworkers and things like that.
What was your experience in trying to find community once you were out as a trans person and, finding people that understood what you were going through and had been through similar things?
That was tough. That was really tough for me. I had, I was on YouTube searching for people who were transitioning, female to male, just to look for some guidance. And really, what I found were just a couple guys who were a few months ahead of me. And these were people on YouTube. And I tried reaching out to both of them. There were really only two and never got back. There was a GSA group in my college. That I attended, but I was the only trans person there. I did know of a few trans women, but that still didn't feel like home for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was really tough, and so that's a big reason why I started what I started in social media, because I wanted to create that space that I never had.
Hmm. And did you find that kind of creating that space brought more people to you that have helped you, or have you just been kind of blazing your own trail and making your own way?
I really think I was blazing my own trail here. I mean, even through the social media itself, I started doing it at a point in my life where I felt like I kind of got it figured out for the most part.
Hmm.
I wasn't really seeking guidance anymore. I wanted to be the person that you could go to. Transitioning and delving right into it was really like diving into the unknown,
Hmm.
into deep waters of not being able to see. At least it was for me, a decade ago. And so a lot of it was just doing it on my own and hoping for the best. And so now I've created a place where nobody else really feels like that.
That's wonderful. Do you feel that, first off, where were you in your transition when you felt like you were at that point where you kind of had everything figured out enough to be able to help and guide others?
Probably around the 5 or 6 year mark,
Okay.
um, for me.
And so you didn't feel like you needed a whole lot extra, but in doing this, did you find that either through the connections you made or just in doing this sort of like a self-therapy thing as you're trying to figure out the things to say and
Mhm.
the things to mean, did you find that that helped you in any significant way?
Oh, absolutely. I'm still learning every day. It's a lot of things that I thought before, um, turn out to be untrue, or there's more information to point to a different direction. I'm still learning all the time. And when I was talking about community, I was just thinking specifically about trans people who are like me. But
Hmm.
there's an entire realm of humans that teach me every day too.
What were some of your key fears when you started transitioning, and how have you overcome those?
I had a lot. Like I said, I was diving into the unknown, so I was afraid that that nobody else would understand, that I was going to go at it pretty much alone, that I wouldn't be able to find a community, that my wife may not find me attractive anymore, that she might fall out of love with me, that you know, it, I would be the only trans person in my group of friends forever. There were a lot of fears, a lot of the unknowns of long term hormone therapy, what that was going to be doing to my body. There were a lot of fears. majority of them have been overcome just by experiencing it and going through it and being like, no, it's fine. I'm fine. It's okay.
Are your TikTok videos and, and the stuff that you're doing there, do those end up being sort of a therapy for you?
Yeah, yeah, they do. And being able to, when I go to answer questions, I don't immediately hit reply and start recording.
Mhm.
I really think about it, and I really think about the best way to word things. And in doing that, I spend a lot of time uh, doing my own research and make sure that I'm saying the right thing, that I'm not providing incorrect information. And that's really helpful. And being able to talk with people who are experiencing things that I went through, and having kids who are experiencing something that I've been through, to be able to help with that, helping others is really the best therapy for me.
Do you have any times where you are hesitant to answer a question, or you answer a question and maybe you learn some other information or think about it in a different way? How do you deal with those? Do you have any regrets on anything that you've put out there?
I don't think I have any regrets, because I truly believe that we, evolve and we grow as we learn more. And that's the whole point of this life, is to continue learning, to continue progressing. So I don't have any regrets. I do try to step back from questions that I get that I don't feel like I have the place to answer.
Mhm.
I get questions often about people who are non-binary or gender fluid, and I don't identify as either. As much as I think I understand about that, I could never fully understand. And people who are male to female, I can't explain on that either. There have been a few times where I've said something and learned more about it and wish that I had elaborated further with the research, but I didn't have it at the time. Hmm.
You've actually taken it a step further and you're going to school to learn to be a therapist, correct?
Hmm. Yes. Yep.
What kind of pushed you in that direction, and what are you hoping to gain from that and to do in the future?
So when I first started on hormone therapy, one of the things that was required prior to getting my first prescription was seeing a gender therapist. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know, what that was going to be for me. And my gender therapist was amazing. They were somebody who asked me the questions that really got me thinking, but only solidified it further that it was the right decision for me. They also made sure that I had a support system, that I was cognitively aware of what I was doing, because transitioning goes beyond just your physical body. It's a mental thing as well. And so um, that was really the first time that I thought to myself, well, I want to be that person one day. It took me 10 years to get in, to actually start doing it, but here I am.
How have your goals shifted as you've moved along your transition? Has that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you first start transitioning, your goals are, finally feeling comfortable in your body, having the world see you the way that you've always seen yourself, um, reaching the milestones in puberty, reaching the milestones in hormone levels where you want them to be, um, top surgery, any sort of thing like that. And so the goals have really progressed over time, depending on where I was.
Mhm.
I didn't get top surgery until 7 years after I started on hormone therapy.
Wow.
And that was right around the same time that I legally changed my name. And so those were major goals. And then it was after that, okay, now I need to get my body in the best shape that I want it to be. Still working on that one, but I'll get there.
What is it that you do in your life on a daily basis to find validation, to find that those moments where you're like totally live into your identity and really feel Eli?
Um, I mean, I do find validation in validating others. I think that really gives me a very big euphoric moment. But in addition to that, when people don't know that I'm trans, and and they treat me like they would anybody else, and then when I tell them that I'm trans, they still treat me the same.
What forms of dysphoria do you still struggle with at this point?
At this point, it's few and far between. that's one of the things that, yeah, I didn't have much dysphoria until I started on a hormone therapy. And then, then all of a sudden I was worried about my height. I was worried about hair on my chest. I was worried about things that I have since then kind of gotten over. If I am feeling dysphoric nowadays, it is something that has to do with my body. I'm more bottom heavy. Don't love it, but it's again something that I, usually just don't care, and I spend a lot of time looking at cisgender men's bodies and realizing that I'm not so out of the norm. Um, but really, that's pretty much it at this point, which is great.
What do you feel that you've been able to accomplish because you've transitioned?
Yeah, the only thing that I can really think of is being able to um, really talk to people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have talked to me about this. We live in such a disassuming society. Everyone just, assumes that the people that we meet and see are cisgendered, and that is one of the privileges that I have, that I think people assume that I'm cisgender. And with that, I am able to almost shock educate people when they find out that I'm trans, because I'm not quiet about it.
Hmm.
And because they've already gotten to know me, I am able to talk to them about it, where maybe if they had known right off the bat, they wouldn't have felt so comfortable to ask me questions, to go into, because they already know me and they know that I'm not going to judge them or get angry about it. I think one of the things I'm able to do now is have conversations that I wouldn't have
Hmm.
before.
Going back to what you had said before, with family members supporting either bathroom bills or legislators that are pushing that kind of stuff, um, how do you handle those conversations? Because as a cis woman, or as a trans woman, I am the person that most people are thinking of when they want to pass these bathroom bills. Um,
Yeah.
do you feel like you have a lot of power to persuade people in those arguments because of the implications of having you in a women's bathroom?
Unfortunately, yeah. And I also realize that these bathroom bills are not geared towards me. And so I think using my voice and visibility and saying, hey, you don't always know when someone's trans. And a lot of that stems from misogynistic, sexist, rhetoric that maybe they don't even realize that they're doing. And so when I'm able to step up and say, you can't always know. And so I try to use my voice for good. I'm very aware of all the privileges that I have, especially in this body as a white man, in this world, that I try to use it for good.
Hmm. And have you noticed a significant change in how you're perceived and how you're listened to because you are a man now?
Absolutely. I no longer um, feel like I have to earn respect. I feel like it is given to me simply because I'm a man. If I'm not questioned nearly as much, it's really wild how I'm treated now from how I was, treated for 21 years.
As we start to wrap up this section, what is your favorite thing that you've learned on your journey?
I have learned about my favorite thing really is learning about all the different ways that you can be human, and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like, and how just so many variables are in place, and I love that.
What advice do you have then to pass on to young or closeted trans people out there?
Oh, that's always tough. It is scary, but hopefully it's worth it. And most of the time, it is worth it to truly be you, whatever form that looks like. I've always been happy, but I didn't know, and I didn't know peace and joy the way that I know it now. And it was a bit of a struggle at first, but I would do it a million times over. And so I think just hearing those words hopefully help somebody just take a breath. And one of the things that I say often in my lives is do it scared. Yeah, it's scary. Then do it scared.
Elijah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and being so open and providing so much insight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was a blast, actually. This is great.